The Enlightenment has left an undying legacy to the modern world, and especially to those of us in the secular community. The beliefs we embrace, separation of church and state, reliance on science and reason, belief in democracy, progress, and the equality of man, were brought forward by courageous and brilliant thinkers. Some of the philosophers were hounded from country to country for many years. Others paid with their lives for their advanced views. In next month's lecture, The Enlightenment, Part 2, we shall discuss the radical philosophers and examine the theory that was their secular thinking that has come down to us today, rather than the concepts of the moderate philosophers. I have mentioned there were putatively two strands of Enlightenment philosophy, and I fully accept the theory. The radical philosophers were an exciting and stimulating group, the Olbach, Diderot, Condorcet, and the others. We shall see in their thinking and writings true atheism and materialism take shape and spread throughout the Enlightenment. We of the secular community today are their intellectual heirs and owe much of our beliefs and ideals to their breathtaking modernism. Thank you for your patience during this long lecture.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Okay, discussion.
So this really wasn't a democratic movement. This was really among the people who were already well off and well educated, saying, I want more rights, I want more power.
Yeah, I think so.
I want to be free to express myself.
Yeah. What do you think? Yeah.
I can see that very much. With my Marxist historical interpretation, I mean, it fits in very much with that sort of view on how democracies and political systems progressed and economic systems, and the justification for the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it seems as though most of the moderate philosophers were not interested in any liberalization, or, and especially that's very egregious, no education. Because remember, you know, that you needed a certain amount of education to be able to like throw these ideas around. These people were just trying to live from day to day, and you know, they were in these horrible factories and unemployed and hungry, you know.
But the concept of universal education was still many years away.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
for them, you know, it was so hard to grasp that you would even be spending money and resources on teaching everyone.
Yeah, but remember, Condorcet and a lot of the, some of the radical philosophers already were advocates of
Right.
universal education. So it really wasn't that far away. You know, they would have instituted it, I believe, if they, you know, had had the means or the ability. So I mean, you know, it was like two different strands of the Enlightenment. Now that's, you know, that's arguable, of course. You know, I just happen to accept that.
But no, I think it's a good model.
Yeah, it really is. Jonathan Israel really is the one that really put it forward heavily, made it respectable, among others. But he's really done an enormous job. It's huge works. You know, he had to prove the case, really.
Why wasn't Voltaire put to death, given his notoriety?
Probably because he was so well known.
Were they afraid of him, or were they?
They were probably afraid of him, but remember, he was also like for a strong secular government, you know, to keep the church in place. And I would think a lot of those monarchs thought that was a damn good idea.
So they
you know.
needed him in some way.
Yeah. What do you think? Same thing with, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. And the role of embracement of property rights. I don't know that he was so interested in that, but I don't know. It jumped out at me as far as
Yeah.
a key component of the establishment.
Right, right. As long, you know,
Going along with the Enlightenment, because
Right.
it did not reject property rights and encouraged them.
yeah,
And, you know, the notion of the bourgeoisie, you know, keeping the landed property holders
Right.
comfortable.
yeah. So I mean, you know, a lot of people, remember that those monarchs wanted those strong secular, they wanted their strong secular governments, and they wanted to keep the church in place. They didn't want the church to rival them.
Yeah.
You know, so if Voltaire was like popping in and saying, you know, like, this is good, you know. You know, they were a friend of his. And probably at some point, I think they were probably afraid to put him to death, you know.
For the popular uprising.
Yeah, there might have been an uprising. You know, he was so well-known, so popular.
You didn't really mention the role of universities. Was that because they really didn't contribute to the Enlightenment? Or?
Yeah, I think so.
That's
Ted, what do you
surprising.
think? I mean, you know, I think that they were like very much part of the status quo.
So all of these ideas, these new ideas, didn't come out of the universities? They
No, only in the sense that the philosophers were educated. I take Voltaire, he was educated by
Yeah.
Jesuits. And, you know, that's always the danger with the Jesuits and the Dominicans. They always educated these very well educated, and they, you know, a lot of them became radicals.
just-
You know?
Yeah, Jerry Brown in California.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just striking. It doesn't speak well for the university at all, the system. That
The universities were like frequently controlled by the clergy.
They were on behind the times,
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
ahead of the times.
Yeah, or they were
But-
like, yeah.
Because when you think of today, you know, they say, well, that's where the liberals come, the liberal thinking is.
Yeah,
deviant,
they
right?
didn't come from
But it
that,
did not.
although some people, I'm sure, I'm not sure exactly, but, you know, yeah, no. Yeah.
And the role of private libraries as well. I mean, they weren't public libraries, they were private libraries, they were
that's the
landed
thing.
libraries.
Yeah, I mean, you had money, you had these great family libraries, but, you know, you didn't invite, you know, the common people in,
Who
even
would
middle
you-
classes like us, you wouldn't invite them in to like read the bloody books.
Well, who would you invite, or?
Your
Your
friends,
friends, your
perhaps,
equals.
and then you would have to, remember these things, they used to have the money to have them beautifully bound. They were usually bound in paper covers, and then they would like commission these beautiful leather-bound things, you know, I mean, they're gorgeous when you see them like in exhibits and things and in books. And, you know, you just didn't let anybody put their little filthy hands on them, you know. I mean, these were fabulously expensive, you know, kind of things. So, you know, a lot of times I think probably a lot of people didn't read them even. It was just for show. Or maybe the owner that put together the library, and then people would inherit it. But it didn't mean that necessarily the heirs were that interested in it. It would depend on each generation if somebody was interested. So you would only let your friends touch it, people that were visiting the house, you know.
And speaking of books, though, what about the role of technology? Does that have a clear, decisive role in the rise of the Enlightenment? I realize
Yeah,
the Gutenberg press, but
yeah,
that was much earlier. So
yeah.
what would you say that technology did?
I think it did a lot. What do you think, Ted? You know, I'm not a real, you know, expert in that era.
I would think it had to help. I mean, it still took money to publish a book,
Yeah.
but more people
Yeah.
could get a hold
Yeah,
of it.
yeah,
You know, I mean, still only gonna see certain points of view
yeah.
published.
There was a lot.
But
Yeah.
you could spread them more easily.
Yeah.
I mean, what had more circulation than any other book?
Technology was, yeah, really important, but it was a two-edged sword again. Remember, you had these factories that grew up from technology
Yeah,
and things, and
that's
that
true.
helped exploit not only the working classes, but children.
Mhm.
And it put people out of work on the farms and what
Well-
have you. It had these far-reaching effects.
And it was the.
But Norm was bringing up an idea too, the technology, the development of the movable type, where you could block up a page and then take the page down and redistribute the letters.
Yeah,
That's
that was
right,
much
that's
earlier.
very
That
Yeah,
was 15.
yeah, and that just kept developing and developing. They
Yeah.
perfected,
Yeah.
began to perfect the manufacture of the individual letters.
That was a two-edged sword too, is what I found out when I was researching my thing on the devil, the rise and fall of the early church, or in later church too, because the common people were getting these like, you know, pictures of the devil, and it helped contribute to the witchcraft thing, which I had never thought of. So, I mean, this popular thing about distributing to a lot of people was dangerous sometimes.
Two-edged sword,
Yeah.
because they got up to
Think of who owns the means of production.
passed along the
Yeah.
superstition.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, you know, they were getting all this stuff about witches and they were reading it. Oh.
Well, I mean, you have the rise of trade,
Yes, very
the
important.
mercantile class.
Yeah,
You have what must have been the postal system must have been improved by that rise of trade, the ability to send a letter and have it actually be delivered.
I think
Somewhere
at
else?
that period, I'm trying to think, England up until the, late 1800s, maybe middle 1800s, again, it was frequently, you know, the upper classes, or even or at least the middle, that would have the money. It was expensive to send those things out. Paper was expensive, ink was expensive, some people still couldn't write, and it was expensive to mail. As a matter of fact, if your relative was a member of parliament, he could frank the letter, and that was like free then. You'll see that in Jane Austen, you know, letters. You take it like to your uncle or whatever to frank, so that you don't have to pay.
What does that mean, Frank?
I can't remember what it means, but it meant like to, you know.
The state paid the mail.
Yeah, the state paid for
Yeah,
it then, yeah.
because the ships were going all over the world, so I imagine that these ships would carry letters.
Yeah, they would, but it was really expensive, and paper was very expensive. People like would write, you know, in between the lines, that's what it's called now, you're reading between the lines, and they would write on both sides of the paper, and they would, you know, like take up, put their writing in as much space
Yeah.
as they possibly could fit in.
Yeah.
So, you know, postage, it was better to have some kind of a postal system, but again, it wasn't really available to the, you know.
I know from my historical knowledge based on Downton Abbey, people who were downstairs had to rely on the people upstairs
Oh,
to
right.
find out news about relatives who were involved in the war, World War I.
There you go, yeah,
You know, and that was, you know,
I
so it
didn't,
could
I
even-
haven't watched that, yeah.
It's fantastic.
I'll bet it is, yeah,
That's off
exactly.
topic.
Yeah, I know, that's not really off topic, because, you know, I mean, it's important to remember that none of this is reaching, you know, the lower classes
Right.
a lot, yeah,
Right.
that's a
you know,
good
there's one-
example
a letter,
right there.
a letter was a big deal, and it was very difficult to find out news
Yeah.
about a relative who was in a different part of the country
Right.
or out of the country.
And some people couldn't read or write, I mean,
Mhm.
actually, quite a few people,
Yeah.
so you had to have the letter, you know, written by somebody, and you had to have somebody read it to you a lot of times.
That-
It was a
additionally,
big
that
deal.
too.
It was a big deal for a long time. It's gonna get like that now, I think, although I think it's disappearing with email.
Well, what were the Freemasons really bound together by? It didn't really seem that they had a single philosophy that would bind them together.
You know, that I can't tell you. There was just a sense, though. I know from reading Tolstoy's novel, War and Peace, one of the characters in there, Pierre, that's a really seminal character to the time. You know, there's this sense that, you know, that they were gonna revolutionize things from within, though, not have a revolution, really. And that men were a brotherhood, and that there were all kinds of progressive ideas, you know. Yeah, you know exactly what bound them: liberty, equality, and fraternity, basically. But it was like very idealistic in some of the people. I remember this character is very idealistic, and for a while he thinks that Napoleon is a good, and then they turned against Napoleon when they realized what a despot he was, you know. It was just part of that heady thing, you know. Like we
And it was
had-
very well structured too.
Yeah.
You could move through degrees, graduate through degrees of the Masonry. You'd be coming in, you'd be a novice, and then
Yeah.
you'd study and
Like the
practice and
Scientologist.
do different
Yeah,
things.
like a Scientologist.
And then you get, level 2, and then level 3, I don't know, the names, there's all kinds of names for them.
Yeah.
But you could eventually become, in the governing body of the lodge, but that would have to be earned.
It's just an interesting development because it crossed church lines.
Yes.
Mhm.
But it had a belief system,
Oh, yeah.
and yet, you know, it didn't really, seems to me, it didn't really replace the church.
No.
So
It was kind
what
of.
did it do?
It was kind of fuzzy and foggy. Well, remember, a lot of, again, intellectuals, educated people, you know, were really sick of the church, sick of dogma and everything, and this gave them kind of a substitute. You know, where they thought that they could, you know, bring, you know, these liberal ideas forward.
And, you know, you mentioned the Anglomania of the 1750s.
That's weird.
But, to modern perspective, you know, King George was so far behind, right? The
Right.
American Revolution said he
Right.
was the tyrant.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
how is it, was he actually more progressive than what we were taught in school? Was he actually?
No,
more
I don't think that the kings ever were real progressive, although, you know, when they did away with James, that was the end of the absolutist Stuarts, you know. But no, but remember that their government was functioning a lot without the king from that point on.
That he was losing his power.
Right, yeah. He'd been losing his power since like Richard the Lionhearted, you know, so this was a gradual progression, I mean, you know, and James was deposed pretty, you know, bloodlessly, finally. You know, they didn't have to cut off his head like they did his father, you know, but, yeah, I mean, as I was reading to you, there were a lot of reforms in England, which these other countries did not have.
Mhm.
I mean, they were very behind. They had these absolutist governments, so England looked good. It wouldn't look good to us, I don't think. And you know, if we went back there, we would probably think it was very backward, but it was very forward.
And did they do away with slavery before France?
Oh, I can't remember what year. Didn't I think they did? Yes.
1820s.
I'm almost sure. I'd have to look that
Britain
up,
did
but I'm
away.
almost sure that they did.
Okay. You didn't mention the Jews at all during the Enlightenment. Do you think that they became better off because of the Enlightenment, and
Good
were
point.
they in any way participants of the Enlightenment?
Well, Moses Mendelssohn and people like that, they were very active. But, you know, that's a question I can't answer. It doesn't seem as though they were persecuted like it at other times.
Yeah, I mean, in the histories that I've read
Ted,
of the
you
Jews,
know.
I don't know.
Okay, I don't know either, no.
the
Go ahead.
histories I've read, they don't play a role in perpetuating the Enlightenment. You know, Spinoza is always mentioned as an influencer, but he wasn't really Jewish in the way that, you know, he was kicked out.
Well, he was
so he couldn't have been
excommunicated, yeah.
Jewish. But certainly, I think there was less persecution. But on the other hand, they were not progressives. They were not ahead of the time pushing for this type of reform.
But some of them were like Moses Mendelssohn that I
But
mentioned.
he was, I don't know a lot about him, but
a
he was more,
Reformed Jew.
he was a Reformed Jew.
In
He
fact,
was-
they say he helped start it.
He helped start, yeah, so he was more though of an assimilationist. We're saying, let's catch up and let's look like German Christians, but let's just go to temple.
Okay,
But he wanted to model the Jewish temples out of the progressive Christian churches.
what was he doing then so active in the Freemasons?
You know, I don't know, I don't
Maybe
know
he
enough
wanted
about
both.
it. But
Maybe
he was
wanted
not
the best of
typical
both
by,
worlds.
you know,
Interesting.
he was not typical of Judaism, even at that.
I would
that time.
guess, no, I would not think so.
So they try to, you know, rescue him as sort of this model, but he was a radical among the Jews. I'd love to learn more about the technology, how the technology pushed the Enlightenment forward. It probably didn't make things better for the common person,
No, but it
but
did-
on the other hand, it gave people more time
Sure.
to
But-
think about things.
But these wealthy people, you know, well, some of them, like Diderot, came from the middle classes, so, you know, it would give them more time and, you know, ability to get to the city and make their mark, you know, as men of letters. But the important thing really was the books, other than the political ideas. It's amazing how important, you know, the literature was, the
Mhm.
political literature.
And was this period, this 150 years, do you think this was a more peaceful period of time in Europe? Or
Well,
was
it wasn't,
same-
there was a lot of war, and
There was
maybe
still
that
war.
contributed to the, you know, the kind of the destabilization of the absolutist monarchies. You can see that Louis kind of depleted the treasury. You know, Louis the
Yeah.
14th, you know,
Yeah.
the Sun King, yeah.
But so there was no less war in Europe at that time than there was
No.
150 years before that.
No.
You mentioned Elsevier Press. There still is an Elsevier Press. I don't know whether it's the same.
Yeah, I think you're right, but the Elsevier, this one was a little bit different, but there was another Elsevier that did like these beautiful classics that they distributed, you know, they reprinted classic works and they distributed them, and many of the middle classes were able to afford them. You've seen small examples, I never had one, you know, offered to me to buy, but I've seen them in libraries, and I've handled them that other booksellers had, and they're beautiful. They're like little leather-bound pocket things. I imagine some people didn't have the money to leather bind them, and those copies probably, just deteriorated.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they were beautiful little things, and they made knowledge very, very available to people. They printed the Greeks and the Roman philosophers and all kinds of ideas. They were fantastic.
And what about pamphlets? I'm thinking of like Thomas Paine. He was a little
Yeah,
later,
a lot of the clandestine works were essays that were in pamphlets. Yeah.
because the American Revolution, was
Yeah.
really, the
Yeah.
idea was spread through the
Yeah.
pamphleteer, was this
Yeah.
idea for liberty.
Mhm.
I'll be
You're
doing a
right.
little bit about Paine, next month, because he's one of the radical philosophers.
Are we gonna have a second enlightenment?
Ha!
Are we so arrogant as to think that we don't need an enlightenment?
We need it a lot, but are we gonna have it? I don't know.
I mean, information has never been easier to distribute or more available.
That's the only good thing.
I mean, all the free information out there on the internet, and, have we seen that much cultural ideological change in the last 20 years?
No, we have not.
What we have seen a
Well, I
lot of
think
is
we have.
people who are specialized in game playing.
Posting their status on Facebook.
Well, but look, I mean,
Yeah.
anybody can post almost anything that they want,
Yeah.
and you can read it if you want.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's always, we're also like going to only the sites we're interested in reading,
Yeah.
and I think maybe that we're not being exposed to a lot of, disparate ideas. I think that's a worry.
The power of infotainment.
Yeah, exactly, or, I generally won't go to like conservative sites, so I'm not getting that point of view.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that's a good thing. I think maybe we should be all reading, like a mix of things. And I think the tendency is to be lazy and just go where you're interested. Speaking of which, you have this big Marxist interest. There's a new website. It isn't that new anymore. It's just new to me because it was in the New York Times on Sunday. It's called Jacobin.
Okay.
Yeah, and I sent Norm
It's
this.
neo-Marxist.
Yeah, it's neo-Marxist.
Yeah,
I
you
can't
sent me
remember
it. I'm not
I
interested.
can't remember the guy. Well, I was teasing
Okay.
you.
It was,
a lot.
it was in the New York Times on Sunday.
Yeah, it was Sunday's New York Times. I didn't post it on the meetup because it didn't really seem relevant. But yeah, it was in Sunday's New York Times, and where was it? It might have been into the Live Living Arts. I'm not sure which
Yeah.
section it was in.
You just don't suppose it'd pop up by putting in the name.
I
Oh,
would
sure.
think if you put Jacobin in,
Oh,
it's
sure.
apparently very popular, and the guy
Okay.
started when he was 21.
Okay.
And it's become like, it's like become very, well established now, and he can't believe it himself. He said he had no right to start something like that at 21 because he really didn't know what he was doing,
Right.
or his ideas. I thought it was strange that he called it Jacobin though, because they were so negative. That's interesting, but to me anyway, I didn't like that.
Just as long as we don't see something about chopping people.
Well, I know, I'm sure it's a very scholarly site. It sounds very scholarly. It sounds really very good.
Yeah, but, the similarities, comparisons between the prevalence of property rights in the landed classes and the ability of bourgeoisie to establish their ideology is very hand in hand
Yeah,
with, with the theocracy.
yeah, it is. Well, the churches have never, been for the working classes. They pretend that they are.
Right.
Yeah.
I
I think that my personal feeling is about somewhat anyway. I don't want to condemn all the priests, but I think that the Catholic Church in this country is carrying on a lot about the, liberalizing the immigration laws and stuff. I think they want to keep those, Latinos, in the church because they're
Yeah.
drifting out. They're going, like Jehovah's and Pentecostalists, and I just suspect them. okay, but then, but then some of the priests were very sincere, during the sixties and seventies, so maybe some
Yeah.
of those guys are sincere.
Yeah, and there's a lot of diversity, of course.
Yeah, there is,
You
but
know,
I'm
and there's,
really
you know-
suspicious of that, we're the friend of the working classes.
But, I mean, weren't the Catholic schools the ones that were making the effort to educate children? Weren't they the ones that
Well, the
were
Catholic
saying-
churches really weren't for, the Catholic schools weren't for a long time, you had to pay tuition, they did give some kids scholarships, but the girls' school that I went to was like all
But-
people with, a certain amount of, like income. They
But
were
that's
middle
late,
class.
but that was after we had a public school system, but I mean,
Yeah.
you have to go back a couple hundred years.
Oh, I see.
For what I'm talking about, is that,
Oh, I
let's
see
give
what you
them
mean.
some credit, that they were teaching things other than the Bible, right?
But the goal, I mean, a lot of times with, notion of missions or international overseas work is to teach enough so the Bible can be read.
Yeah. And
Explicitly the
yeah,
mission.
I'm-
In a lot of cases,
Yeah.
not every,
Good
of
point,
course.
that's actually a
That's
good
a
point.
very good
Yeah, I'm not
point,
denying
yeah.
that, I'm saying that it helped though in ways that they didn't expect.
Yeah.
It had an outcome that was not favorable to them, but nevertheless, they were the ones that were facilitating, it,
Yeah,
which was
yeah.
the ability to
Yeah,
read,
yeah.
or the ability to think,
Yeah.
or to
Well, that's what happened
To
with
learn
the
about the word.
Jesuits, I mean,
Yeah.
they were, they still are very superior thinkers,
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
but the people that
So-
they educated often became free thinkers and, agnostics, atheists and.
Yeah,
and
but
what have you.
that's the danger, I think, of taking an atheist perspective on enlightenment, is to dismiss this moderate Christianity that was happening and to say, oh, well, that was just working in their favor. I don't think it was. I think it was working
Well,
against them.
I don't really want to dismiss it, it's just that, Israel has made it so clear, in his work that, that there were these two strands, and I think it's important, Yeah, I thought I spent almost too much time on it, but then that was the main thrust of the Enlightenment, this moderate,
Yeah.
thing. The famous intellectuals, tended to be on the moderate side, so
But they
that's
didn't
why I spent so
understand.
much time on. I'm much more interested in the radical strand, to
Yeah.
tell you the truth.
But even the moderates, weren't they self-aware of what was going on? They,
Oh, yeah.
They had an awareness of
Oh,
this
yeah, well, you
change.
can see how Voltaire,
Yeah.
and the rest of them, and even Locke, who we consider very moderate, they were contributing enormously to the change.
Yeah. So I think it's important to see that, is that they could not see what they were really doing was allowing us today to inherit an
Yeah.
atheistic point of view by just advocating moderate reforms.
Yeah, but the
But-
other guys were like far ahead of them.
Yeah, and I
Much more
haven't heard
radical.
your lecture yet, so yeah.
Yeah, I think, I found that more interesting,
Whereas today, I don't think we have that self-awareness that we're in the middle of maybe we are a second enlightenment, when.
Well, I hope so.
When you
We-
have, 20% of
I'm gonna go to the bathroom
US
a minute, but yeah, you can throw that around,
It's
throw
not,
the stats around, guys, because,
20% of us say that we don't have a religion in the
Right.
United States.
Right.
Well, that's
And growing.
change, and it's growing, 5% a decade.
Did you listen to Weekend Edition last week?
Morning edition.
Yeah, Weekend Edition last, right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
During the week.
5-part series, yeah.
Yeah.
And even that was sort of a moderate.
Yeah,
take
very
on-
much.
Very
Yeah.
moderate, yeah.
As a sociologist, Robert Putnam being on was, interesting. I know him from my sociology studies.
So did you find it to be an accurate reporting?
There's a lot of anecdotal information, especially during the week, I thought.
Yeah, it's kind of
Which, is a little disappointing. I do have a friend from, well, I guess he's still a friend, we haven't been in touch much, who is actually a sociology religion major, who's a non-practicing Jew, as far as how he was raised and his outlook religiously.
Is he local?
No, he's he's actually at University of Nebraska now. He grew up in Manhattan and went to graduate school at Penn State, did his undergraduate at Florida State. And anyways, he was why I was interested in Putnam, and I wanted to talk to him about the
Oh, yeah.
about the Morning Edition series, because they were reporting on the nuns. I knew that those who identify as nun, N-O-N-E,
Yeah.
reporting on the nuns, and I thought his take would have been very interesting.
Yeah. because it hasn't gotten a lot of attention, and in that way, that's why I feel that maybe we are in a second enlightenment, but we just don't know it.
Yeah.
Because it's just this creeping, we were taught to fear, the fundamentalist Christians, but actually there's a creeping atheism that's going on that your average person, the average American is not aware of. That actually, they're losing their own religion, it's going away. So that's why I'm optimistic about the future. That 20% will become 40 or 50%, in 20, 30 years. 5% a year, you're gonna have half of the people atheists.
Mhm.
So that's wonderful.
Yeah, and the word has so many connotations to a lot of people. I wonder how many people identify as agnostic.
Yeah.
And put them to the screws. If they'd actually say, well, maybe I am more of an atheist, but there's such,
But even the
and
word.
regionally,
Yeah.
it changes a lot too. My parents have a house in North Carolina, and there's some fairly liberal neighbors of theirs who, the word atheist is just such a dirty word to them. They can hardly
Yes.
say it
That's,
without
the
sounding
problem.
like it's nasty.
we've been talking about
That's
that.
a problem.
Yeah, I mean, the joke that, Dawkins has an example in his book, and that, I can't remember that lady comedian, I can't remember her name.
Yeah, Julia Sweeney.
Julia Sweeney, and it happened to me,
Oh, this is
I
interesting.
hate, these guys, I've heard this about 3 times.
Oh, we'll be
but,
bored, but
Yeah,
please,
yeah,
it's
but
very
please
interesting.
continue.
This is
No, because
excellent
I mean, it's
example.
happened to so many atheists. My former hairstylist,
Who
I didn't
shall
leave
go
her because
unnamed.
of that, but she was so, she knew me socially as well as, commercially. And she had known for years that, I didn't believe in God. But one day I said the word atheist. She said, Mary, I didn't know you were an atheist.
Yeah.
You know for years that I didn't believe in God. And she said, but I didn't know you were an atheist. And Dawkins reports something like that in his book, The God Delusion.
Yeah.
Julia Sweeney, I think it was her parents, I can't remember, a relative, somebody, they said the same thing. That's incredible to me. You say atheist and people go
Yeah,
nuts. You
Yeah.
say you don't believe in God, so all right, okay, unless they're real Christians.
Right.
But I mean, if they're kind of liberal and they're thinking, okay, so all right,
Yeah, but just say,
yeah.
But that's just a cultural
Yeah.
artifact. I don't think that that's significant over the long term.
I
That's just
hope not, because
nobody
people
knows an
think that
atheist.
atheists are like bad people. I mean,
Yeah, I
they're
think
immoral.
I fear it might be more common than you think, more prevalent than you think it is.
Yeah,
But-
I find it so, I mean.
But the word is not inaccurate, right? I mean, it's
Oh,
it's
yeah,
inaccurate.
no.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's,
no,
no,
it's
the-
the,
yeah.
it's
the
As
word,
far as
the word is
dictionary-
not the
as far as
problem. The
dictionary
cultural,
connotations,
the
though.
cultural
Yeah.
construct around the word is the
Yeah.
problem.
So, but as the culture changes, that is, as it becomes more a none, it's not gonna be a big deal.
I hope you're right.
It's like gay. It's like saying, coming out as gay might have been a big deal 20 years ago. It's less and less a big deal today, right? So.
Still depends on.
Yeah,
a lot
again,
on-
it depends, but I
Norm,
think it's
I'm
better to.
sorry, I don't have your optimism.
You don't
I
have
think
to-
it's better to say
Yeah.
you're gay really than you're, an atheist.
But that wasn't always true.
Yeah, you're right, things change,
Things do change.
Yeah,
Change.
I think that's where we don't see, we're in the middle of a second enlightenment.
Well, I hope so. Now, Bruce Sterling, a sociologist in England, and he's an atheist, but he thinks that things will trend. He thinks that we're about 50 years behind, Europe, but that we're becoming more secular. But he thinks that the movement will be more toward, indifference to religion rather than, like diehard kind of atheism. But then, of course, we can't predict.
Right.
Well,
I
the
don't know.
younger generation, the people in their teens, and Eric's, our grandson Eric,
Yeah.
his age, and that'd be the late 20s and early teens, right through. They're not even fazed by same-sex marriage. They don't even, unless they're heavily religious.
Yeah.
They're very tolerant of this kind of thing.
Well, they're also, like, his girlfriend is an atheist, and a friend of hers from school, they're atheists, but again, they're pretty indifferent. They don't belong to any atheist organizations or,
Yeah.
They freelance it.
Yeah, they freelance, they don't even think about it half the time.
But that's because the conflict is always at the edges. The people who grew up atheists, they don't have that conflict. It's the people who had to push against something.
No, they grew, her friend, he grew up in a Jehovah home, and she grew up in a heavily Catholic
Well,
home.
something happened. I mean, somehow they became an
They
atheist.
just somehow just didn't believe all the crap they say, you know,
Yeah.
I had to talk with them both.
But for those who, today who are advocating marriage equality, that's where the cutting edge is,
Yeah.
right? That's where the conflict is.
Yeah.
And that keeps getting pushed forward.
Oh, I agree, yeah,
Oh, I
yeah.
think so.
In California, I remember when I was in high school, there was an initiative to try to ban gay teachers from teaching in the
Yeah.
schools.
Oh, yes.
That's what I
They're
remember.
still bringing it up in the South.
Yeah,
See, so, but it's not going to happen. I mean, we're pushing too far forward.
Yeah, I would
For
say
that.
so,
There are school districts in the United States that question your Christian background.
yeah.
Okay.
They may not put it down on a piece of paper.
Especially in the South.
But they certainly
When you
do
say,
push
when you
that.
say North Carolina, you know.
Oh, yes.
Ted, our son is in a gay marriage.
Okay.
Okay, in California, naturally, we're
Yeah.
on San Diego.
And he's sort
well,
of
still, it's been such a controversy there. I mean, they've had
Terrible.
state laws go back and
It's
forth.
terrible.
Yeah.
And he is one of those indifferent atheists.
He really is.
But
an
this
indifferent
reinforces
atheist.
my point, because he grew up in an atheist household.
Yeah, you're right, in a sense, yeah.
So the push, it's always been that way. Whatever the debate is, it's on the edges. But the edges keep moving.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I think we're probably, if that British sociologist is right, we are 50 years behind, we're moving
Mhm.
into more secularity. But, we have these damn great awakenings, like about every 40 to like 60 years.
You mean the Christian?
Yeah,
the
we're
Bible?
on the downside, it looks like, of the last one, the fourth
Like
one.
the-
4 great awakenings.
Yeah, and would you consider what the evangelical movement?
Yeah,
A key
yeah,
component of that.
and now it's kind of waning. Their kids are, which I was hoping, like I've gotten, I think, pretty sick of it, or grandkids or whatever.
The
That-
Bush daughters
yeah.
versus the Bush father and grandfather?
Yeah, exactly, yeah, exactly.
I guess more so the Bush father versus
Yeah.
George the First.
Yeah, the old man wasn't,
Yeah,
he wasn't
right.
that pious.
Right.
As a matter of fact, wasn't that funny when people were acting like he wasn't gonna get better? And he said, and he got a little bit better, and he said, put away your harps.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, he said
Yeah.
that, put away your
Yeah,
harps,
put away your harps.
everybody put away your harps, I'm
Yeah.
coming out of here. It's so funny.
I'm going
But
to
I don't think he
emerge.
was ever as pious as that nutcase of his
Right.
son.
That isn't said in the
Tell me what
press.
you meant by the Enlightenment was the recovery of nerve.
Yeah, I think Peter Gay did some interesting things about that. He meant confidence, human self-confidence, which the ancients had a lot of times, but sometimes it failed them too. As opposed to the Middle Ages, when things got, very, dark and sad, and people were afraid. They didn't rely on themselves anymore, or on their human skills. It was all God. And, it was what God ordained, it was a failure of nerve. I thought it was interesting.
But why would they suddenly recover their nerve?
Who knows? Maybe all these ideas that we're gathering. It's really hard to tell why movements begin. Maybe they were just sick after centuries of the church and the absolutist monarchs. Eventually, Carl Sandburg has a kind of schmaltzy poem, but it's not bad, where he's reading and he's talking about the revolutions that took place in the 19th and 20th century. And he said the people sleep, but sometimes the people awake. And I think he's right about that. I think that there's awakenings that we saw, not our great awakenings in the
Please.
USA.
In the United States, that means something entirely different.
Yeah, but I mean, they do have these like moments in history, but they don't last long enough,
Because it sounds like the reform was very uneven, that the kings came in and out,
Yeah.
the dictators,
Yeah,
that there wasn't, the way there was in the United States, a clear revolution, that now you had a democracy.
no, yeah,
And I didn't understand that about the French Revolution that there was.
They had a lot of
such a
autocrats
failure.
after that,
Oh.
absolutist, you know.
It was
yeah.
not like what we had at all.
But it kept, you notice how it kept, you know, they would be deposed or they would die and then the things would go back and forth. And you
Yeah.
notice eventually they got to a very strong secular state.
What year was that?
Oh, gosh, who knows?
That
I
was
mean, by-
late 1800s?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would say late 1800s, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a real expert on, you know, French
Yeah,
history.
maybe Ted knows.
But the concept of, you know, I don't wanna, you know, go into the French idea, but it's a concept of secularity. It's very strong, you know, embedded in the people, and you can see that with the difficulty now that they're having with religion. Or, you
And the
know,
question, one of the questions on the table is, when did France pull away from slipping back into the dictators and got away from that and went into more parliamentarian, constitutional?
Was it
government?
about late 1800s, would you say? Concept of, you know, secularism?
When it finally really
Yeah,
was permanent.
yeah, I guess I don't have good, I don't.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, actually, I'm not a real expert on French history.
Because I just assumed that it was like the American religion.
No,
No, it wasn't.
no.
It
Yeah.
kept
No, it
going,
was horrible,
flipping back.
actually.
And they failed.
No, it was horrible,
When
that's
did
why you
Napoleon
had all
II
these
get,
counter-enlightenment movements.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And, you know,
Mhm.
In all over Europe. I mean, you know, they got really scared. I mean, you know, all of a sudden, they were going like, you know, oh, this is a terrible thing.
Hmm.
And then people thought that Napoleon would help things, and he didn't at all. And then they woke up to that. So there was this long, long period. But still, I think the French today even are just more dedicated to secularity than, you know, almost any. Now, you know, the Templeton money is now gonna fund this stupid, I have it posted on our meetup
Goodness.
site, you know, for religious freedom. I mean, come on, I mean, we grant more religious freedom, but they say that they're not gonna take on the, you know, church-state issues, but it's more individuals. Like this, Jewish guy that became, well, he wasn't Jewish, he became a Jewish convert in prison. And they denied him a circumcision, and they're taking up cases like
In
that.
France?
No, here.
Here.
In the United States. Yeah, it's a
Get
new,
a circumcision.
Stanford University, it's a new center that they've established, and at least half of the money is from the Templeton Institute. And that's according to the New York Times.
Oh, Seventh-day Adventist, working for FedEx, cannot work on Saturday because of his religion.
All of them.
And they can't, the FedEx has fired him.
Fired them. I think there's several of them. But I mean, you know, you go get another job for gosh sakes. I mean, why would
Yeah.
you take a job that has Saturday labor if that's your Sabbath? I mean, you know, come on. They're taking on cases like that.
Interesting.
Muslim, the what do you call them? Temples, yeah, that are apparently not in in whatever line with the whatchamajiggy, the zoning laws. I don't know those cases at all.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know, but all I know is
You mean
the
the
temples-
mosques?
Mosques,
Yeah,
thank
mosques.
you, yeah. They've been denied, you know, building things, so they say that they're not, you know, within the
Following zoning law.
things or whatever. So apparently they feel it's unfair, so Templeton's gonna, I shouldn't say Stanford, the civic thing is gonna be taking on these things. The link is in our meetup site.
Mary
If you want
keeps
to see
the message boards up to date with current.
Okay.
things that-
Please
Okay.
feel free
You can
to
comment,
contribute
reply.
anything you want, as long as it's about religion, you know,
Yeah.
or atheism, or, you know, secularity.
You really mentioned any kind of organized backlash against the Enlightenment.
Well, no, because it came after that, and I'm just dealing with the Enlightenment.
What came after?
The backlash, it was very
The
strong.
backlash. But while it was happening, these writers, didn't sound like there was another school that was openly fighting them.
Oh, yeah, there was. So the church was fighting them, conservative thinkers like this guy Popignon, and, you know, I mean, there was like this horrible fight in the academy alone. You know, the French
Yeah.
Academy. I mean, they weren't just like going around and having a free hand. You know, I would say most of the French intellectuals were, you know, pretty conservative. I would say it was a general trend. I would say that like now, they're probably the majority of your society, it was pretty conservative, like we are in this country, fairly conservative, you know. A lot of progressive, you know, things, and some people extremely conservative, you know. Well, Pompignan, I mentioned, I guess that he isn't, yeah, but I mean, he was part of that party of people, and they lost, they finally lost control of the French Academy.
Okay, yeah. you
That's
did
very
mention it.
important, and that was a very conservative group of people
Mhm.
prior to the, you know, the
But,
philosophers.
and the Royal Society, that was a scientific society.
Yeah, but those societies were pretty, you know, Newton and Locke weren't exactly, as I said, you know, they weren't exactly big progressives.
No.
In fact, Newton got a little crazy with religion, if
Yeah.
you recall, at the end. I think his mind was going poor man or something, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah, and Locke, you know,
You know,
Locke
it's a
was,
fascinating time.
yeah, I mean, Locke you wouldn't consider like any big radical. I mean, you know, to real conservatives at that time, yeah, maybe he was, but, you know.
What else was I gonna say? The colonies, the American colonies had the advantage of being separated physically from all that turmoil and being able to try new things, obviously, because it was a
Yeah,
new
right. Well, you
society.
remember when I did atheist history, I touched on that, and the fact that a lot of people just didn't go to church and really weren't members, despite all
Yeah.
that propaganda.
In a history of atheism in America.
Yeah, because, I mean,
In the
you
United
know, the
States.
facts and figures have been established.
Yeah.
You know, everybody says like, what are your references? And then I have shown them the references, and then,
Yeah.
you know, and this is stuff that
Yeah.
even people that are Christians have said, historians. So, you know, you have that sense that you're not going to, when I read it, that, you know, there's this idea in America that, you know, if you're not going to church, do you really care if the guy next door, what religion he is? There isn't this real sense of, at that time of, you know, well, I don't like this guy, he's a Catholic or a Protestant. Now, it would vary, you know, like by colony. Because some were like Maryland were established by real Catholics, so there was less toleration and what have you. But generally, there was this, and there was also this sense that, you know, it's not that they were atheists or anything like that, but they didn't like the king, you know, of England claiming that he had a God-given right, you know, the
They
divine
didn't
right
wanna
of
pay their
kings.
taxes, and they wanted to
Yeah.
keep
and-
their money. It was a
yeah.
capitalist revolution,
Exactly,
you know?
exactly, and they didn't wanna be, you know, like told that they had a, you know, a duty to the king and everything. So there was this sense that, you know, they weren't that religious at the time, that made a difference. You know, they didn't wanna accept the fact that the kings had a divine right, or what have you.
So Ted, do you see this more as an economic revolution, even the
Oh,
Enlightenment?
for sure. Oh,
I see it as a key driving factor at the very least. I wouldn't say, you know, I mean, it's not that simple, nothing is, of course. But, yeah, I mean, I think its success has a lot to do with, not truly being a movement of the masses, but,
Yeah.
you know, a bourgeois revolt against the aristocracy
yeah,
and throwing off,
Yeah.
you know,
The
I mean,
American Revolution,
it made
for sure.
it made the pool of the wealthy larger, but, you know, they wanted to keep their money, you know, they wanted to expand the pool, and industrialization allowed for the capitalists to have more power and have more money, but they didn't wanna, you know, they didn't want a proletariat society by any means.
Don't forget though, there's these philosophic ideas that, you
Yeah.
know, are also, you know, circulating. The Enlightenment ideas that came to America and then went back to the Enlightenment, as I just said. So again, you know, you have a thought revolution as well as an economic revolution. It's interesting.
Yeah, but even the thought revolution was for those who had the money,
Yep.
right?
Well,
So I have to
the
agree
rest
with
of
Ted
the
on
people
that.
have to work in the fields or whatever, or like they're not even lettered.
They weren't getting this information, this
No.
thought.
Yeah, but they were getting the information, you know, that the king was a tyrant, they had to pay money, a lot, what taxes on windows and stuff, those leaded windows and
Oh,
things
yeah,
like that.
that was terrible.
I mean, come on, I just made a little
Yeah.
money and now I can put leaded windows on my house and you want this huge tax and now I can't afford it? You know, forget it. Who are you to tell me what to do in this country? See, I mean, there was all
Right.
these little things that were aggravating, not little things, but big things actually after a
Right,
while.
and you know, is paying taxes up, you know, whereas the problem we have in this country now is, well, if you consider it a problem,
Yeah.
reluctance to pay taxes down.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
I mean, people still they still wanna keep their money, they're just not paying it to a king, but they don't wanna give it to people below them either.
Exactly, nobody wants to give anything
You
away,
know,
yeah.
I mean, and it's this Christian notion, I mean, you know, you have the nuns who are conflicted between conservative politics and progressive
Boy,
politics.
that's
Because
fascinating.
they're very, you know, they're very much, you know, anti-abortion.
Oh, yeah.
But they think helping the poor is a good thing.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so, you know, give them, you know, somebody as mainstream as Obama, and they're very conflicted.
Yeah, and also too, I mean, I understand that, you know, in countries like Africa and things, you know, priests and nuns are covertly, not all of them, but many, have been handing out condoms and things
Yeah.
like that, because they know the realities.
Yeah,
of the
or, you know, or
situation.
like say, you know, support for organizations such as Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of, you know, you'll find
Yeah.
a lot of nuns who, you know, maybe they don't like government money going
Yeah.
towards, you know, abortion funding.
Abortion, yeah, yeah.
But they think family planning might be a pretty darn good idea because, you know,
Sure as hell would
poor
be.
unwanted children
Yeah.
don't have a very nice life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what I mean, I hate the Christian conservatives for that. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, you know, get these children born, God cares for every soul, you know?
Yeah.
And then they don't care what happens to these children who are very prey to becoming like criminals or, you know, all kinds of, you know,
Yeah,
bad
exploited
things.
in all sorts of ways.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
if they're,
horrible.
you know, if
It
they're.
really makes me angry, you know,
Mhm.
it really makes me angry. I mean, if you guys are such Christ lovers or whatever, then why don't you help take care of these kids once they're born? I mean, you know,
Yeah, right. Right.
either that or like and they're not even for
Well-
family planning.
No.
Well, suffering is a part of life. so
Yeah,
they
maybe
see that
that's
as-
it,
Right.
maybe that's
They
it.
see that suffering as
Yeah.
okay.
And that whole,
Yeah.
and the whole notion of self-reliance, and, you know, if you succeed in this country, you earned it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
earned your
Yeah.
success, you know,
Yeah.
it's the notion of a
Moral.
meritocracy
yes,
is, you know, very prevalent.
yeah.
And it all fits together for a certain conservative point of view, where you don't have to help those below you and the, you know.
We should all disclose our thing. You're a Marxist, Jim and I are progressives, Jim is more progressive
Well,
than I am.
don't use my
And Norm's
name.
conservative.
Yeah, I wanna,
Fiscally.
Fiscally, he's a
I
social, he's a
appre-
social, liberal.
I appreciate Marx's interpretation of history very much.
Okay, yeah.
You know, saying, I mean, a Marxist revolution is not going to happen in this country, nor would it succeed.
No way.
So I'm not going to identify as a Marxist. I'm also practical.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm not scared of the word socialization.
No, I'm
when
not
it- you
either,
know,
yeah.
And then, you know, I'm very in favor of, you know, inheritance privileges and with the way healthcare is in this country, you know,
Yeah.
domestic partner benefits for,
Yeah,
gay
boy,
couples.
that's important, that's
But, you know, I
insane.
got married so I could have healthcare once to a woman, and I was in a heterosexual relationship, but I had to get married to have healthcare.
Oh,
You
my
know, because I
God.
very much needed healthcare, and she had a good job at the state of California. The same, any Michael Moore fans here?
I'm pretty much a Michael Moore
What?
fan.
Did you see his entry on not supporting the troops?
No, I didn't.
Very controversial, very well written.
Oh my
He said as an American, he can't claim to support the troops.
Oh, my God.
He said, I don't support the troops,
Well,
I'm
actually-
American. Because if I did support the troops, I'd be organizing sit-downs outside of the homes of veterans whose banks are foreclosing on them.
Yes,
And I'd
that's
be,
part
and
of
I'd
the
be
problem.
organizing sit-downs to get better mental health care for our veterans who commit suicide at an astounding rate.
Well, you know, there's a suicide rate among the veterans. as well.
Yeah.
Our son, before he retired, was an Navy officer, so, you know, I have mixed feelings, but we were against him enlisting in the first
Yeah.
place, I mean, you know.
Years ago.
But you know what, it's really a mercenary army.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, again, it's like a class army, because in
Absolutely.
general, unless it's the officer class, and boy, there's a real distinction in the Navy, I'll tell you that,
Yeah.
you know. It's poor kids out of these crappy areas, you know, that
Yeah.
need jobs.
I mean,
you
how
know.
many senators have children in the military?
No, some of them do, some of
Very
them
few,
do,
though.
yeah.
Very few, one or two.
Yeah.
And, you know, they won't even diagnose them apparently with post-traumatic stress because they have to pay for it then and give them, and these guys are just turned loose. I think that's a horrible thing.
Yeah, it's terrible, it's terrible.
And then Walmart is promising them all jobs. Now, all the veterans that are coming.
Yeah, America's number one
I'm going, oh,
employer.
great, yeah, get a shit job at Walmart, you
Yeah,
know.
right.
You didn't get your legs blown off, so you're lucky you could come back and work for, you know.
You could be the working poor.
I thought that was terrible. I mean, everybody's congratulating them.
Mhm.
You know, oh, Walmart, that is so good for them, you know, supporting our troops. But Moore must have made everybody mad when he said that, didn't he?
Oh, terrible.
I didn't
there
even, I
was-
missed that.
There was such a big backlash that he actually got a letter from Facebook because they had so many complaints threatening to shut down his Facebook page. He later received an apology.
Well, good, thank you, Mary.
Thank you all for putting up with this long lecture. It was, it got out of hand.
Oh, it wasn't too long.
Well,
Not too
you know,
long
there
at
were
all.
so many elements
Yeah,
in
there's a lot of
the
information.
Enlightenment, you know, and when you try to bring them all together, it's, oh my gosh, you know, it's incredible.
I'm very impressed with all the work that you must have put
Thank
into
you,
that.
it's a
And you must
lot
put
of
in
work.
all
Oh,
the
thank you
I
for that.
do, and all
Believe you
those.
me, I
Thank you
bear
so
witness, if you want a witness bearing, I bear witness to that,
Blood,
the
sweat, and
scholarship
tears, you
involved
know, I
in
mean,
that.
it's like, oh
My
gosh,
goodness.
how do I handle this one? You know, it's a lot of fun though, too.
Good, I'm glad you enjoy it.
Yeah, I do, as much as I complain. If you ever want to give one, please feel free.
Yeah. Please, make
On any
arrangements.
topic, yeah, please step
As long as it's
forward.
Atheist studies.
Right.
Well, yeah, of course, atheist studies.